Good evening everyone, my name is Cormick. I work for orq.ai and that's a GenAI ops platform based here in Amsterdam. We're basically a lifecycle management or end-to-end platform where you can test, evaluate, ship everything into production. But today I really want to focus on how to evaluate LLMs, because as funny as this might be, if you're really building anything that you're exposing to your end users, you want to properly evaluate it, similar to how you might test for traditional software engineering. Some of you might already have seen this. So Chevrolet had a chatbot, but they actually were legally obliged to sell this particular car to a buyer for $1 because of prompt hijacking. So many of you know like the great things about LLMs, so I don't have to go into that, but they are still non-deterministic, which makes it also very crucial to evaluate them. I already touched upon prompt hijaction, but also one of our customers is doing stuff in the educational space, or first things students or kids basically do is always like, can I make it say racial stuff, or tell me why Hitler was a good guy, like all that stuff, which you don't want to happen. Then there are also some other things that you might take into consideration, such as cost. Do you really need the most expensive model for all your use cases? Stuff like latency. If you're building like consumer-facing apps, like your end user doesn't want to wait 5 seconds constantly, so that is a good one to take into account. Also tone of voice, that really speak to like your tone that you're setting up. And for the people, especially the agent builders, the tool consistency is super important. Like having your LLM decide which tool to call at the right time, at the right moment is very crucial. And also, does it actually use your tool in its output, or does it respond with, sure, here's your JSON, which you then have to filter out for. So, I'm gonna go into orq now. This is a new feature that we have been building. Let me start off here. This is a data set, which consists of a question and a human curated answer. And what I'm basically trying to achieve here is running through all these input fields to see, and this could be thousands of rows, to see across historical data if, for example, like a new model or a different prompt created a better output. And this human curated answer can be very helpful to use certain evaluators. See, there's a question. Excuse me. It doesn't seem to work, but doesn't really matter as long as you understand that there are different fields with inputs that can be, in my use case, questions from users and a reference that you are checking against. This use case, by the way, is American Airlines, an FAQ bot that uses a knowledge base, which is basically a vector database with its chunks, full with FAQs. We're using a tool, which is this. Is this? Can everyone see this, by the way? No. Okay.
Just so
yeah, I can zoom in this. Yeah. And I am using a knowledge base, like I said. I imported my data set, which is now here in the inputs. Basically all the questions, so is there a price reduction if I pay for my checked package online? And then the expected output is something like, well, first it should respond with a question, which I then map the answer actually to the end user. Now, I did set up 4 response columns. So I'm currently using Claude 3.5 Haiku, and this is my prompt. but I've designed a new prompt which I want to see if that is actually better, which is this prompt. Like I use some tags here and it's a little bit more extensive, but like before just like pushing it live, I want to evaluate if that is correct. Now I've also heard great things about GPT-4o Mini, which I'm also comparing like my old prompt and my new prompt against. Now I could simply run this and then see all the outputs side by side, but I don't want to do that because I might be lazy or you have other things to do. So therefore I want to use evaluators. And because I'm using a tool, I'm using a JSON schema validator. So if it is actually using all the fields that I set up as required, or if it doesn't start with, like I said in the beginning, sure, here's my JSON and then 3 backticks and the rest of the answer. Also, I set up an LLM as a judge, and for the people that are unfamiliar with that sort of concept, it's basically a language model that checks the output of another language model. And in this case, it is if it is responding with the tone of voice that I specified here according to the American Airlines concepts. Then I'm also using cosine similarity, and we support a bunch of like other traditional algorithmic evaluators or coming from machine learning that basically check if the expected output, which you saw in my data set, how similar the vector representation is to my newly generated output. And then there's a score between 1, which is like exactly similar, to 0, which is like the complete opposite. This also encaptures sort of the meaning, so you don't match if there is a similarity word for word, but if there is like the meaning, if that is similar or not. Now, since this is a RAG use case, retrieval augmented generation, we could also leverage RAG-as evaluators that check like if the retrieved chunks from the knowledge base are relevant or not. But just for demonstration purposes, I will run this experiment now. We see that everything is queued, and then shortly after, all of the models will start running, 10 at a time, so we don't hit into rate limits. And you can see here that they already start showing up. And you can do the math, like if you're running an experiment with 1,000 rows, this will take a little while, but this is way more granular than checking everything one by one, or as was previously mentioned, like just vibe checking. Oh yeah, it looks good, I've tested it a few times, let's push it to production.
It would be nice to have a CO2 counter too.
It is initiating a lot of requests at once, since like the rows, like now I have just 19, but I go like multiplied against the number of models, and then also multiplied against like each evaluator. So there are a lot of LLM calls being orchestrated in the backend.
Do you run it on your API keys or on the customer side?
This is my own API keys.
Of course,
Yeah. But you can actually choose. We want to make it as easy as possible for people to experiment with multiple models. Let's say you don't have a Grok API key yet, but you really want to see how fast they really are. You can just use ours.
Okay.
And,
Can I ask?
Yeah, sure.
Can you also can you scroll all the way to the left again, so I understand correctly? Because for some of these instances, it would be nice to, instead of have a single run of like fail pass, for instance, when you're doing like an LLM as a judge, that evaluation, to be able to average over multiple runs for a specific data point. Is that something that's also possible, or do you even have to just copy paste the same row?
Yeah, what you could do is indeed like have multiple of the same rows. But what we tried to do with like these filters at the bottom is like, okay, across like all your rows, like what is the average, or like what is the pass rate or the fill rate? Yeah, to be able to sort of answer your question.
Yeah, cool.
But now we can see is like after 1 minute and 8 seconds, the experiment is complete. I can zoom into the comparison mode, so I can see like everything side by side. And then also open specific logs, but what I'm mostly interested in is the evaluators. So I can already see that cost is like a huge difference in between like Haiku and GPT-4o Mini. Latency, yeah, same thing. Now my schema evaluator seems to be working best with the new prompt. So I can definitely see in terms of like the prompt or the schema, my new prompt adheres much better to it. And the tone of voice, like apparently my old prompt using Claude was the best, but then yeah, I want to see like the bottom row has to fill, so let's actually dive into that. Why is that the case? Well, first of all, like here we see it doesn't adhere to the schema, but then I'm sorry, but I can't help you with this question. Yeah, it doesn't seem too negative to me, so I'd rather look at all the edge cases rather than like every output one by one.
Question.
Yeah.
What constitutes a failure in the evaluation of tone of voice?
Yeah, so I prompted a model. In this case, I think it was Gemini 1.5 Flash, because I want to get it done quickly. And I basically prompted it to say like, okay, if the tone of voice is negative, then you should return false. And then we actually map it to fill, so it's visually showing. But because, yeah, like I wasn't very specific maybe, it classified this one as a negative tone of voice instead of, yeah, positive.
And about the schema, JSON schema evaluator, what about that? Like, what's the criteria for
I can
pass?
show that. So let me see, I have it here. This is my schema, and if it returns with something like different or it misses the answer field, yeah, then it will return false.
Oh, but it's about the structure then.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, or if it's not a valid JSON first of all, then it will also return false.
Okay.
Can you also, maybe you already said this, but can you also supply custom on Python code as a custom evaluator?
Yeah, very nice question. In the next release, we're actually going to introduce Python evaluators.
Cool.
We have a whole library. Maybe I can quickly show you that. So the Python ones are coming. Oh, now I'm a bit zoomed in, but yeah, a lot of different functions that sort of are in the library that you can quickly copy or modify. And basically, we never want to be the blocker. So if there's any particular evaluator that you want to run, you can always do an API call and yeah, evaluate it on your side.
Do you use any LLMs to judge templates, like a Prometheus or something?
Yeah, so let me just say age appropriateness at the library. Like this is then the template that you can modify. It might be a bit small, but we do provide all the templates.
And also the prompt template of the LLM evaluator is homegrown or grown, is not something that's following, let's say, standard templates that you would see when you use something. Prometheus from the guys from Face. They have like a standard, like one point for this, 2 points for that, 3 points for that.
No. But we have like people taking all the best practices, and perhaps this is one of the ones that we can add to build like good templates that then customers can use. but arguably the most important evaluator is cosine similarity, so really looking at the quality of the output. And then I can see here that, I don't know if that's visible clearly enough, but with the heat map we already try to visually make it apparent what the differences are. But then really on here I can see that my new prompt using GPT-4o Mini scores the highest. So now I can confidently sort of ship or merge to a new model and use my new prompt without testing in production. And that's basically it. So thank you for your attention, and if you want to use this yourself, feel free to shoot me a message or an email and connect with me on LinkedIn.
All right, thank you, Cormick. Very interesting and useful. I see there was questions already through the talk, but now if people have more questions, is also a good time. Here.
So, on those prompt templates, right? Because I've been playing with this AI stuff, and every time I run into what is the exact template that they want me to use, I can't really find out the exact way I'm supposed to do it. Some people have these XML-like or HTML markers. Other ones have other structures that you feed it. In your experience, how sensitive are the AIs to doing that wrong? Because I think everybody is just doing stuff. It's like, oh, it's sort of okay, but how sensitive are the models to doing that wrong?
Depends also on the model, but now finally the model providers are starting to give out sort of the best practices so that people then can incorporate. I must say, like, the more complex your prompt or the longer your prompt, then it becomes more and more important, especially with like agentic stuff, when it really needs to choose between multiple tools at the same time and maybe answer 3 questions that are merged into one question. Yeah, then having like a best practice template is really important.
Right, because you also have like the system prompt often, right? Mm-hmm. And for me it's always very fuzzy, like what should I put in the system prompt and what should just go in the normal prompt?
A system prompt, what I always say is like that are your core instructions that the model should always respect, and then the rest is just the particular task that it should do for that particular query, and then it might not be needed for like the follow-up conversation.
All right, over there.
Could you just show what it looks like from the API perspective? How we would actually use this programmatically?
Oh, good one. So I mean, this is just a Postman setup. We have a Python and a Node SDK, and like you would see a similar screen to the experiments module that I showed, where you configure your prompt, your model. We generate a code snippet for you that you can basically use. And then when I'm invoking a particular deployment, this is then what you would get in return. But you won't be able to run an experiment, at least of now, through the API. But our deployments module is really where you put stuff in production, and that you sort of use us as a middleware for your whole GenAI abstraction.
Got it. So the reason I'm asking is because, like having worked in MLOps, one of the main things that we were dealing with was data drift and like model performance drift. So I guess the main approach now would be go back to the UI, move all the new data in, and then run experiments again, and then deploy the new stuff.
Yeah, or we're making like the whole platform headless, so that every module is sort of available through the API. The good thing is like every LLM call that goes through us is logged, so you can have add them all to a data set, potentially like the ones that your end users rated as bad, and fine-tune or like prompt engineer based on those like negatively or poorly rated logs to see if there's actually improvement.
Got it. Thanks.
Cool.
Yeah, one question, right?
So I assume that this also has some form of repeatability in it, right? Another maybe newbie question. Every time I shoot a prompt at an LLM, I get a new answer, right? Which might be wildly different or wildly wrong. So is there some kind of seed parameter that you lock it down to, or how do you deal with that variability?
Yeah, you could use the seed parameter, but because like inherently these models are still not deterministic, you could also like now compare two prompts and two models next to each other. You could also do.
They're not deterministic.
What?
They're not deterministic.
Yeah.
Like if I put the same input in, the same output would come out, right? It's a GPU.
No, like
You
models
can't
are
Depends
still.
on the temperature, right?
I would like if you it's a computer, like it's not some quantum thing. You plug data in, and the same answer is supposed to come out.
Well, yeah, no, for LLMs that is not the case, but that is what makes them so powerful.
Chemistry building sometimes can produce a bit different results, and it accumulates, so you won't get extremely different output, but it can be the same with
What causes that variability?
Chemistry building mostly. So your GPU heats up, and then different constraints on operations come in, and at the end you have a bit different results. It's not drastic. It usually is not the case, but it can happen even with the same thing.
Okay, so now
Also
it's
there's
alive.
some-
It's alive then, by that definition. It's quantum entangled with our world.
Or like it's probabilistic in a way, and yeah, that makes it sometimes answer a little bit differently. But you can control this with the seed parameter and also the temperature. So the temperature of 0 gives you like closest to deterministic answers.
All right. Thank you, Cormick. Yeah, thank you for all the questions. That's what we like the most. AI Thinkers is usually the back and forth and the questions from the community that makes it the most interesting.